All right, here we are. Happy Thursday morning, a sunny one in Denver, a smoky, fiery, kind of kooky one out in BK. How you holding up, Kev?
We're holding up. We're holding up all right. I would say everyone's kind of running around like a headless chicken. It's our first time ever seeing like an orange sun, orange skies. But all in all, we're New Yorkers. We're tough.
I like it. Cool. Yeah, that's more common out here in the Rocky Mountains than anybody would like, but it's definitely an interesting thing. So we appreciate you being a trooper and showing up bright-eyed and bushied, although the sinuses are hurting, probably not sleeping that well, all the above.
We'll get there.
Beautiful. Yes, that's it. Just one foot in front of the other, baby. Right on. All right. So here we go. I mean, second episode that's kind of in a recorded video audio format. We're going to be jamming on issue 14. And for those that are tuning in, my name's Kjael, president of Skaling Ventures. We acquire and operate small software companies, micro SaaS companies. And I got my partner in crime, Kjael, on. If you want to say what up, Kjael?
Kevin Lewis, CEO of Central Metric. I would say we are the main gurus behind all of your tech revenue operation transformations as it relates to micro SaaS. So excited to be here.
Boom. All right, cool. And as we were just talking about before, kind of three beats emerging for Skaling Ventures from a content perspective. We have kind of the OG when I was just kind of getting into the thing, and it was like, hey, I need to build muscle around evaluating deals, and obviously, refining the scorecard. So there's very much like, hey, let's do a deal teardown. Let's look at a micro SaaS acquisition opportunity. What do we like? What don't we like? How does it perform in our scorecard, et cetera? And then let's complement that with an operate element. So it's like acquire, let's look at a deal, operate, let's think about a SaaS framework or a playbook or something that's useful for the operators. And then musings was basically just a safe space, or shouldn't say a safe space, a dedicated space for me to jam on whatever craziness was going through my mind. And then we kind of made an acquisition once upon a time, a couple months back. And I was like, all right, now let's start to blend in. How are we thinking about transformation? What are the OKRs? What does performance look like? What's our scorecard, et cetera? And now we've kind of evolved to include this third beat, which is more of like a, hey, mid-sprint, here was one of our OKRs. Here's some of the activities or the actions that we've taken to execute against that OKR. Here's what we've learned. Here's how we're course correcting accordingly. And the hope here is to kind of flip the traditional private equity vibe on its head, where, I guess very open and transparent about the portfolio. Hey, we did a deal. We're very jazzed about it. And then very opaque about the transformation activities. Instead, we want to keep the portfolio anonymous, try to move in silence as much as we can, and then be, I guess, way more transparent about what we're doing to make the asset more valuable. So that all sound good? Does that make sense? Are you feeling the same? Those are kind of like the three beats we got going, right?
Yep. I'm feeling the same. And I would like to keep a dedicated space for jamming. Musings are it.
No doubt. Beautiful. All right, well, let's jump in. So I think for today, and obviously we announced the video, and so I'm hoping people are vibing, and honestly feedback's great. It's like, hey, this is video sucks.
Like to hear about.
Yeah, I'd rather just read about it. Cool. Or hey, I'd like to hear more about the playbook stuff, or I'd like to get more visibility into the OKRs. What's the rationale behind the OKRs? How are you measuring it? Why are you sequencing it such a way, et cetera? We're all ears. Well, here, I'll do a quick.
Maybe you understand all these topics already and you're already a whiz at it, but you're like, how does tech enable all of these ideas? That's a question for us too. Let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. You can see this one. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, cool. So yeah, so this issue here, just kind of a quick one. So we announced kind of the new digital stuff, the audio, the video, and then we did a teardown of the OKR, and then we did some miscellaneous stuff. So this one's interesting, right? So I mean, like the objective was a comprehensive understanding of our ideal customers and existing channels for acquiring trial users. And I guess why do you think that's important, Kev?
The reason why that's important is because when you're stepping into any business, you want to kind of understand, how have they survived to this moment? What have they done? Did people just find them, or did you actually go out there, become proactive, and get creative in how you acquired folks? What was the cost to all of that? Can we repeat those methods successfully? What can we do differently? It's all about, if you're acquiring a company and you're becoming the new operator, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the previous owner and the users to understand where's that value point in the middle.
Totally. And so I think there's a few vectors, right? Like one is make sure you understand what's working so that you don't fuck it up. Pardon my French. Like the last thing you want to do is break what's jiving. And you can only, this is not exactly applicable, but it's kind of like the same root. And it's like a problem well defined is half solved. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, hey, it's, some OG Buddhist wisdom. So it's like, all right, let's just really understand what's working for us now, because then we can kind of understand the surface area for improvement. And the other piece that's interesting too is the diminishing kind of returns on channels. So, like in a lot of e-com, all their traffic is like one keyword,
And there's
right?
time decay to that.
And it's like, oh boy, or it's like, God, if we lose our position with this one keyword, that's like, environmentally friendly phone cases or, whatever. And we're talking like hardcore e-com plays right now. And it's like, oh
Mm-hmm.
shit, we just lost our position. Now all of our traffic's gone. Boom, revenue just erodes overnight. And hey, nice knowing you. You're the Walking Dead, right? So there's in that sense. And then I guess the tendency with micro SaaS, right? I guess what's the profile of the founders more often than not?
It's usually solopreneurs. Kind of just had an idea. It was for a personal problem. They realized they were onto something, and it's kind of all right. Let's put this out in the wild. Let's see how people interpret it. And then, they might be in a community, a specific niche community with a certain type of skill, say a photographer or a DJ, and the community kind of finds value in that tool because there's a personal connection to it. So usually, when you find these small founders, that's usually what you're running into.
So do they know go to market or do they know product?
That's the thing. I would say they don't know either as well as they need to. They know how to
Okay.
solve their own problem for themselves, and then they learn go to market and they learn product in the process.
Okay. But I would say they're probably technically competent more than anything, right? Like they can
More
build
than anything.
software. They can build software,
Yeah.
whether they're either writing code or maybe they've done some cool shit with no code, whatever the case is. They build a product, and that's where it's like, it's so like when you're having conversation, because for us, if we're, we have our consulting hats on or like our lower middle market operator hats on,
Mhm.
it's like, hey, what channels do we have lit up? It's like, well, we have some organic coming from this. We've been just, paying the content toll for years, and that's, a slow burn that's starting to pay dividends. We've been parking some paid ads on LinkedIn. We've got an SDR if it's a sales-led growth thing, right? So I guess long story short, we've got 2 or 3 channels that we've invested in, that we've
Mhm.
measured over time, we've iterated over time. And when you talk to the vast majority of micro SaaS operators, founders, sellers, however you want to define it, it's like, I got one channel. They come to my website and they buy it. Right. And it's like, and we provide a dope product and we bend over backwards to support our customers. And it's just because it's such a kind of a practice of love. And there you go. Right. So I guess main thing is like, hey, which channel are existent, and we have to assume that there's been almost no investment behind them. There's no kind of paid
Right.
or targeted or data driven acquisition. And you can't measure or you can't improve what you can't measure. Right. And then obviously you can't complement what you don't understand. So
Mhm.
that's that. And then I guess when we broke it down into key results, we were thinking about a quantitative definition of our ICP, which is, firmographics. And the analogy I always use on this one is, if it's like the best way to have you come to me and like, hey man, I want to make some new friends. It's like, cool. I need the data on your 10 best friends. Where do
Let's
they
create a
live?
profile on them.
Yeah, I'm like, where do they live? Where do they hang out? What do they wear? What do they listen to? What do they read? What do they boom, 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 boom? And then it's like, oh shit, it turns out they all love leather jackets. They hang out in West Brooklyn. They're, XYZ. And it's like, cool, we've got those 5 data points, which are quantifiable. Now we have a much better likelihood of going out and finding you some new friends. I was going to go the dating route, but let's keep it PC.
I wanted to keep it PC because I know when it comes to dating technology,
Yeah,
by far for decades, they have figured out how to do profiling the best.
for sure. Cause it's just a matchmaking algo. So, but essentially it's like, hey, if you have
Exactly.
these 4 attributes or in ML speak features, we can assign a
Hmm.
certain probability that in
Yep.
that you'll go on a first date, right? Or that they'll, buy your software or whatever the case may be. So the first thing is assigning a quantitative thing. Cause a lot of times it's like, oh, it's, SMBs that, are, that's it. And it's like, oh boy, no,
Yeah,
no,
it's
no,
all
no, no.
qualitative
And it's like,
in
well, let's
theory.
look. And the best way is let's look at the critical mass of customers that you have, and let's find the patterns, and then let's use the patterns to be smarter about how we acquire, simply put, right? And
Yep.
then surveys are useful. And then obviously you have kind of the digital surface area. So Google Analytics is great for that. There's all kinds of other stuff. So we kind of wanted to snap. So it's like, hey, let's look at our customers. Let's look at their behavior. Let's kind of round that out with market research and define our ICP. let's conduct some surveys and just get some qualitative stuff in there and some primary research. Let's look at our digital surface area and see what we can surmise from analytics. And then it was like, and let's, while we're at it, let's pump more traffic through the system so we can better inform all the shit up here. And then once we've started to understand our channels as a function of this, and obviously where we go from here is let's light up acquisition, right? So it's like, hey, let's understand our shit right now, and then let's use that as a point of departure for adding muscle and adding new channels to the system. But let's identify 3x optimizations to the channels we got. This was kind of an arbitrary thing. Like I think we'd be cool with 1 or 2 optimizations. And then here was the other one. We launched a new website, so it was like, hey, let's just make sure that trial users doesn't fall off a cliff, because that's the weird thing. Like when you're in any environment, but for sure with product-led growth, where it's like, turns out our personas like the beat ass VW wagon. Like
they like what they like.
Like we rolled the Tesla out, and that's not how they get down. So we're now like we're just we alienated them, and it's like, oh fuck, and it's like, all right, well, you probably didn't understand your users good enough. So you kind of got to get to a place where you can take bets like that. But you always got to be prepared for like some super counterintuitive thing to happen, and you're just like, all right, switch it back to the old website.
If you think about it, people can be creatures of nature until you show them the true value of how the new solution is better. Look at when we were moving from the horses and the horse-drawn carriages to the Model T Fords. Everyone fought against that until they realized, this can actually improve my life in the way I do things. It's a matter of education on top of it, which comes down to knowing your customer.
Yeah, and there's good frameworks there, like crossing the chasm. And that, the one I say all the time is, especially or I guess the OG one is they asked, if Ford would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? And then with Steve Jobs, they're like, a phone with no buttons. Like, are you out of your goddamn mind? So I think there's a piece of that where and you kind of have to introduce friction and be outcome oriented too, right? Where it's like, hey, you want to get to this outcome, you're familiar, and there's obviously a ton of there's a mental model for that as well, but it's like you can kind of just think almost like neural pathways where we establish grooves and rhythms, and so much of us kind of functions on autopilot and is subconscious that if you start to break that stuff, the wheels come off, and people like weird shit. So anyway, cool. So then, so that was kind of the headline. So just to recap, the objective is like understand our current channels and get very defined about who our ideal customer is. And here were some tactics that we went into it. And then we elaborated a little bit on like a general overview around like, okay, like big picture, let's zoom out. How the hell, like what are some best practices and some steps? I don't want to say that this is like an SOP or a playbook, but these are kind of good kind of pillars for this exercise. So we got understand current user behavior, implement conversion tracking, understand the user journey, analyze SEO and organic traffic, monitor social media, understand referral traffic, and then create a reporting structure. So, and keep it simple, stupid. And I gotta say, that's been a huge thing in my mind lately, is like, how do we make this simpler? How do we make this simpler? How do we make this simpler? So what are some of the cooler things that you've done at CMT on understanding current user behavior? Like Lucky Orange is pretty radical, and I like the hot jar, like the hot jar days. Or I guess, what's your favorite kind of sneak attack tactic for uncovering? Okay, let's just call web traffic and product usage.
Yeah, so in terms of web traffic, without like going in the structure that we have the article, I would say generally at CMT we'd use SEMrush or RFs to kind of look at what people are searching for and how they're getting to you. That's one way. And then the other method is, once they're on your site, you have to use, like you mentioned, a Lucky Orange or a hot jar, just to see what are they actually doing on the site. If you're looking at the heat maps, where are they clicking the most? Where are they engaging the most? And then you kind of want to create like an A/B testing type of landing page to see, okay, if I was to slightly change some of those elements on a B version, would I have the same interactions? And that would be one scenario of how we kind of capture human behavior on the front end from web traffic perspective. In-app usage is slightly different. Usually you tend to lose some of that visibility the moment someone logs in. So what I typically like to recommend to folks, if you have a web application, because we're talking SaaS, integrate it holistically to that same Lucky Orange or Hotjar, tie that in with maybe a Mixpanel or Pendo type of solution so you can get those usage stats, because you want to determine where's the value being driven in the product, right? What feature are most of your users going to? If it's for example, a tool allowing people to book meetings with each other, are people actually setting up multiple tailored types of booking pages with different meeting types? How often are they logging in, and actually what is the volume of those meetings? Are they connecting different calendars? Are they inviting staff members to it? How is it actually improving their lives? You want to look at those types of things to understand if we're going to make changes to the product, is this a feature that someone actually loves and uses regularly? If anything breaks, what would be the impact as it relates to churn? These are all the data points you start to think about once you monitor usage.
Totally all about, yeah. So I guess to put that simply, right, you have kind of, and if we think about the buyer journey, and this one, I probably should have pulled this up, even like it's like the first thing you want to do is just think about the buyer journey, period, right?
Yes, end to end.
And Figma is beautiful for that. Like the little jam boards, Miro is good for that. I mean, an OG whiteboard is good for that, where it's like, okay, we don't know what happens over here. And I've talked a lot about the bow tie, and that's my, winning by design is awesome. Their methods or their frameworks are totally dope. But it's like, all right, we don't even understand what happens, but they come to our website. Okay, cool. They come to our website, and then what? And then they navigate to something, and then they commit to a trial. Cool. And now they're in a trial or freemium or whatever. And we're talking PLG, right? Sales led would be like, and they click talk to sales. And now we run a sales process, and we do discovery and qualification, and we, put a demo together, and we pitch the business, right? So it's like, right, here's the bow tie. So it's like website onto our thing. Cool. And then it's like, okay, now they bought the product, right? And now we can see what they're doing in the product. And so the cool part is that as time goes by, you're just rounding out all these data points, all these features, right? And so at the beginning, it's like, we can tell that, you're whatever, and it's kind of cookie based, and it's UTM parameters, and you're looking at Google Analytics, and I wish it was not named Ahrefs, because I have like a speech impediment with that shit, but it's like Ahrefs, whatever it is.
I just say Ahrefs.
Ahrefs, sorry, I'm cool with that, but just so everyone knows, it's Ahrefs. It's a very dope tool. SEMrush is cool. And then, God, what's his name has another one too. Uber keywords or something. Neil.
I heard like about it. Yeah.
The SEO Don Dada. That one's a little cheaper. Neil Patel. So anyway, those are good. That's good tooling, because it's like, cool, let's just figure out what's getting people to our website. And then when we're on the website, you have good visibility, but a lot of that is UTM parameters or cookie based type visibility. Then they buy the product. Now they're in the product, or they're trialing the product. Now we're talking about server side events, where it's like, hey, and then you can associate the events that occur within the product with a feature, with a module, and now you're blending the buyer journey should look like, here was a visitor, here's the firmographics. Now we've got some information from them when they committed to a trial. So we have their business domain. So now we can say, this is the business type, this is how the size of it, this is the geography of it. Maybe you can grab your arms around some of the other tech tooling, some technographics, right? So you have firmographics, size of the firm, technographics, what's the other tooling that they have? And then we get into product usage data. And now you've got a really pretty robust customer profile, right? Cool. So I think that's all. And that's something that I wanted to do too, heading into next week when I get some kind of deep focus work, is just kind of mapping out the actual buyer journey at our portco. Because then you can also think about the little loops that you have, where it's like, hey, how are we driving traffic to the website? Cool. What happens if they fall off? What does that look like? That little, retargeting kind of re-engagement loop. Cool. They're in the trial, they convert correctly. And just thinking about all these little loops that exist, little viral growth loops, ideally.
If I can add to that,
please.
The most important part here that we haven't mentioned yet is, for tracking the data against all of those loops and getting visibility into what's going on, you need a system of record, whether it's Salesforce, HubSpot, Zoho, Fresh, that you name it. Get a system of record, and this is where you're going to plug all the tools we just mentioned into that system of record. So you have, and most of them have AI enrichment now. So that person comes in with a company domain, it creates a company in the example of HubSpot, and it's going to start to enrich industry, employee size, things like that. Now you have your technographics, your firmographics, everything is in your system of record. Now you just need a BI tool laid on top of that, like a data box, and you visualize it all for the company. So now you have scorecards to understand who our people are, Are we getting them in an effective amount of time? What does that cost of acquisition look like? And how are they being influenced by our platform or our marketing efforts to get more engaged?
Love it. Love it. Okay, cool. So, and this, it's so funny because my trajectory was very like sales led, so it was like,
For a
how do
lot of
people
us, that's where we started.
yeah, it's like, how do people find your website? It's like you kick down their goddamn door until they go to your
Yeah.
website.
You message
It's
everyone
like,
that works with them on LinkedIn until you get that
yeah,
connection request accepted.
you just John Wick it, to the gills. And then it's like, hey, and if these, if these mythical leads, marketing qualified leads come in, happy days. But that's gravy. And
Yeah.
I'm for damn sure not counting on that to hit a quota, to hit a ARR target that's set by the board, whatever the case is. And then all of a sudden you kind of remove that now. And obviously you can get clever with outbound prompts, and you want to think about the cost of shit, right? How much does it cost to send an email? 0.0. I mean, you could bake
Right.
in labor costs and shit, but relative
Exactly.
to
But it's
ads
like
and stuff,
0.000. It's
sense.
negligible.
And that's why email's arguably kind of broken, right? It's so goddamn noisy because it's very cheap. So anyway, but it's been a fun treat for me to get more dialed. And I think it's basically, if we were to really simplify this stuff, it's use analytical tooling to first get a grip on how folks are finding you, and then get more specific about the actions that they're taking once they have found you. And then you can start to round out how that fits into a user journey. And then I would even say that from there, you can kind of just balance to like a reporting structure. Like that's a very good start. And it's like, all right, cool. Like, let's just see what is our base rate for this stuff, for, I guess, traffic and for conversions. And then, now we can start to associate improvements or disprovements getting worse, depending on
Yes.
what your actions are. And then you can be more clever about referral traffic, social and referral traffic and stuff like that, and SEO and organic traffic. That stuff all is very easy to get smarter about. And as I kind of noted, SEMrush and Ahrefs here. But cool. So that's that.
To quickly summarize, I would say clean, comprehensive data will always be your best friend.
Yeah, and and honestly, you can get scrappy as shit nowadays, where it's like, hey, like we have our website. People come in, they start a trial that feeds into an Airtable. The Airtable has a Zap that hits GPT-4, an API, and it enriches the account. Cool, happy days, right? Like there's some really scrappy no-code ways to put that shit together. All right, surveys. This is like some people that are good at surveys are like voodoo masters. And like, I remember back in like business school, we did like this whole kind of design driven, and the professor, he was an Aussie. He was a nut. He was awesome. His book was quite good. He worked for Frog Design, but he had this method. And that's when I first started to really appreciate who was like, how good are product managers too. That's like the number one weapon in their toolkit. And Tim Ferriss, in Tools of Titans, he wrote a lot of stuff about, like for him, he got his interview questions down to 10 questions, and he thought, and the questions were incredible. So instead of like, what's your favorite book? It was, what book have you given to people the most often? Instead of, so he got to like he splits the atom with a lot of his shit.
It's more action based around your behavior.
And it gets to the real thing, because it's like, and then it's also like the concept of compartmentalizing. So humans don't like blank canvases, right? Or like totally open. So I'm like, hey, Kevin, who's a friend? You'll be like,
what kind?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I got plenty.
Like, who's your best buddy in Brooklyn that works in SaaS? You're like, ching, 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 boop, right? And so you compartmentalize it so that mentally we don't just kind of, it's the same thing. It's the paradox of choice, right? If you get handed this is like a Chinese menu, Chinese food menu, right? Like that's where that whole thing came from, because it's like, holy shit, there's so many options here. I don't know what I'm going to get. And we just glitch out, right? So there's that piece is like, all right, hey, what questions do we include? And Tim Ferriss, his whole thing was sequencing questions. He thought that was the real sauce. So it was like, you want to start with something that's kind of open-ended, that builds some comfort, and then you kind of want to get more and more pointed. And then there are other frameworks around like the five whys, which I've spoken of. I think we've written about that in the past, but which is like, you got to ask why 5 times basically to get to the real answer. So take all that stuff in. Surveys are hard. And there are some hard, like, to put it, I should have probably just gone there right away, but
Yeah, and people
there,
don't want to answer them.
no. Well, and it's so funny because when I sent a bunch of these, I was like, God, I'm not, or well, let's go into well, let me just finish the thought there. I'm like, damn, I offered up $20 for a survey response. And then I went into my inbox and typed survey, $20. And I was like, oh my God, I have probably 200 emails asking for a survey response for $20 that didn't even hit my conscious radar. They didn't even hit my mind. I just was like, bing, bing, okay, cool, back to what I was doing. So anyway, surveys are hard. And there are some very acute trade-offs. So one is, and I did my best to articulate these simply, but substance versus likelihood of a response. So simply put, you want as much shit as you can get. The more shit you ask for, the less likely they're going to respond. So and that's just a bummer, right? Because the tendency for any kind of market researcher is like, I want to extract as much information as I possibly can from you. And literally with every additional question, the likelihood, and I'm sure there's some good data. I should have done some research around this, but I'm sure there's data where it's like for every added question, the likelihood of a response probably falls off by like 20%. Or
if
something.
you have some links with some data to this point, drop it in the comments.
Yeah, I should. Or it's like, it's like you've got 5 questions. Or no, you've got probably 3 questions. And it's like, and the likelihood that somebody will fill it out is 40%. You add a 4th question, it's 30%. You add a 5th question, it's 20. Like it's probably just like just goes down. So that's one. Then the other is structured responses that simplify things. So it's back to, it's like, hey Kevin, like, what made you get into SaaS? And you're like, ugh, and instead be like, you had somebody else that was working in it. You kind of landed in it as a function of, a job that sounded in, right? So you provide options to, again, kind of compartmentalize the things so you can go. But the more you compartmentalize, perhaps the less likely it is that you'll get an accurate answer. So those two things are you restrict the surface area for what an answer can be, right? So another hardcore trade-off. And then incentives. It turns out that, $20 is probably not really enough to stand out, or, maybe that lever doesn't work, period. So it's more about timing that ask and doing it when the attention quotient is a little bit higher.
I would love to see, if anyone's listening, I would love to hear some research around how do you identify how someone wants to be incentivized. I was asked that question yesterday while providing product feedback to a automated trading software, speaking with the founder, and he's like, would you like us to pay you for a referral or provide a credit to your subscription costs? And I was like, huh. And then how many referrals before you actually receive an incentive? So I would be curious to understand what is the data around how to incentivize folks and which creative methods are actually like working and not working. Because I got to assume if there's 200 emails in your inbox all offering you $20, at some point, that's no longer of value to you because there's 200 sitting there.
Yeah, totally. Or I think it becomes like a unit of energy thing. And then it's like, hey, what's what's your hourly rate? Right. And a lot of really good OG business thought leaders that are all about operating leverage is like, you outsource cleaning your house because you can pay someone else $100 for those 2 or 3 hours to clean your house, and you can point yourself for those 2 or 3 hours towards making way more than $100. So it's about operating leverage and like the unit, because time is the only thing that doesn't scale, right? So
exactly.
So that depends on who you're surveying, then, or that's a whole heady thing.
I love that
right?
train of thought, though. There's something there.
It's like, hey, if you're surveying an exec, or just even think about like lawyers. If you're going to survey lawyers, it's like, all right, dope lawyers is out bill hour $500 an hour. It's like, all right, I'm assuming this
at the minimum.
Oh yeah, I'm assuming this. Actually, let's do this. So it's $500 an hour, and we think it's going to take 20 minutes, which would be let's just say 0.2 of an hour, or I'm sorry.
No, do 0.25. That'll be 15 minutes.
0.25. You got to pay him $125.
There you go. 15 minutes of your time, $125. See, now the way you did that math, now it makes more sense. Maybe everyone is just throwing out there, $20, but not even thinking, what is this worth to your time?
Yeah. And I guess an extension of that is all the expert networks, right? Because they're like, hey, I get hit up all the time for like HCM tech, alternative investment tech, yada, yada. And it's like, $100 an hour. I'm like, I
Yeah,
don't know.
especially when
I don't
there's
know.
firms out there like GLG, Gerson Lerman Group,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they're
totally.
paying subject matter experts to come in and be speak on panels, just provide information to researchers, and they're paying them handsomely.
Yeah, but that kind of that first courting one to see if you're a fit for the thing, and it must be based on seniority,
Yeah.
because it's like, hey, if
Yep.
you're, an executive vice, blah blah blah. So, anywho, surveys are trippy, incentives are trippy, and I'll say the big thing for expert stuff that becomes really critical in diligence. That's a big hack for micro SaaS acquisition
Mm-hmm.
diligence. Is like, how do you light up former employees? How do you light up current customers? How do you light up competitors, et cetera, with quick 20-minute asks, and not relying on a
That
GLG or an
that
expert
would be
network.
worth that'd be worth an extra issue, a deep
Yeah.
dive into an extra issue.
Yep. Cool. So this is the survey that we ended up sending. When did you first realize you needed a tool like Portco? What was going on in your world? And this was this is still kind of validating what the prompts are, or, like the growth playbook from Growth Bots, or the art of customer acquisition, is like you have kind of the ICP is like, I guess, said another way, we'll navigate this lightly. There is a profile of a gal that is a perfect match for you, Kev, right? That doesn't matter if she has a boyfriend. What matters, are what's golden, is if we can match that perfect profile with the timing, right? Which is, she just broke up, and maybe that's not the right timing. She just broke up. She was on a rebound for a little while. And now she's coming back into romantic relationships, right? So you blend kind of the profile with the set of conditions that make them likely to, buy the software, partner with you, whatever. So this
Almost
question
sounds
is,
like an episode of Black Mirror with matching.
yeah, right. So we have kind of that piece, and then we went into what jobs or use cases are the most important for you to get done. And I was kind of gleaning off Tim Ferriss for the first one, where it was like, hey, long form best practice, start with an open-ended question, kind of create a little bit of a safe space. But this data is less structured. You can't run pattern recognition. You have to read these responses, right? So if you're doing huge surveys, open-ended questions are a bitch. Or huge meaning you send, 1,000 surveys, then you have to start to do you can use some large language models to summarize it and find patterns and stuff, but otherwise you're reading it. Question 2, we get into the jobs, or the jobs to be done. And for this one, I wanted to test the messaging on the website, and I wanted to make it quick. And this is one where it's like, hey, what were you trying to do? And you have to be careful with how open-ended this is. So for this one, I did the 4x job to be done statements, and then I just did a score 1 to 4. So it's like bang, 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 and they move on, right? And then now we get into the root of what we were trying to really understand. How did you come across Portco? And so traditionally, this is a single selection dropdown, which is like internet search, word of mouth, social media. So not very useful. Or it's like, hey, we know that word internet search. It's like, okay, that's kind of interesting. So this was really a leading question to compartmentalize it. Like, hey, here are 4 or 5 ideas. Cool. Now that we've kind of zoomed you in here, give us the real answer, which is like, what did you search for when you did the internet search? Was it a private group on Facebook? Was it a Reddit forum? Was it a Discord group? Was it a whatever? And you actually get to the root of what stands out. And then what made Portco stand out? And this was honestly one where it was just to kind of understand a little bit more, and as an extension of the job to be done, because I think that in business management platforms for SMBs, and this is where a lot of it's like, all SaaS tastes like chicken, right? Because it's like, well, what does it do? It's like it manages scheduling, invoicing, proposal generation, day of execution, book, blah, blah, blah. And it's
But
like,
more generally, what does the software do? Save you time, save you
yeah,
money, save you headache.
yeah.
It's like, all right.
All right. Or it's like, if you keep going down, it's going to be one of those value props, right? It's either going to save you time, or it usually hits time, which then translates into a cost savings or more productive revenue creation, right? If you really get to the root, but you got to that messaging obviously sucks. So anyway, so what we learned, and I wasn't thrilled with the response level. And I think what I learned is that this is more about the timing. So, and
Say more
obviously,
about
like,
that.
I like, the best, or back in the day, the best time to ask for an NPS survey is when the implementation project wraps up.
Yep.
So like, how do you time this around like peak attention and engagement? Or
potentially seasonality.
or like, how do you time? Well, it's more in the buyer journey, right? So,
Right.
or in some kind of journey where it's like, hey, you're totally focused on us. Now's a good time to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Or you're totally delighted. Now's a good time to like ask you a favor in the form of a question.
Right.
And then you can just get human with it. So what I did is I kind of tried to backfill them. And instead, like, it should be when we have somebody convert to a customer, we hit them with this prompt and we give them $20, or hey, we'll give you a month off. And then you can start to be more dynamic with the incentives, right? It's not just cash.
Right.
It can be and that's interesting too. And I just did a survey for our kind of OG ambassadors, like very loyal users, want to take their input into account as much as we can as we refresh that program. So I've got some insight on the preference around incentive structure, and I just made it simple. Like, you get paid, or basically you pass what we would have paid you through to the person you referred as savings. So it's either a rev share or a discount. For us, it's the same. It's like a 20% off the thing. Either you get it or they get it. Decide. And so we should have some good, or not like crazy statistically significant data, but we should have like 15 points of view on it.
To create some dialogue around that, some of the ICP quantitative analysis that we did, I know it looked at certain regions in the country, and then there's the seasonal periods where events may go up or down in terms of bookings. Let's say for weddings, would that be a good indication as well for who to reach out to for that ambassador program?
I'm not totally sure I'm following you. So you're saying, well, I think seasonality in most.
If we're looking for those folks that might be good to be ambassadors, right? They've been with us for a while. We see that they're using some of the key features of the platform more than others. And then we want to tie that into, well, why? Is it because where they're located, AKA they're in an area where it's more than likely a wedding destination? And then if they are, then is there some kind of seasonality to that? So if there is, maybe we capture them with a survey, or we try to hit them to get into that program right when we know this is the season when they're going to be using the platform more robustly.
Yeah, totally. Or the other way, right? Where it's like, avoid these types of activities or these asks when they're peak volume. So, and that's like, restaurant, I mean, all kinds of categories have seasonality. And I guess OG, and I think that, I should say there's kind of different flavors of seasonality. Like, you have budget cycles, which are in kind of enterprise SaaS, where it's like, hey, Q4 is going to be big because that's when it's kind of a use or lose it tendency for corporate budgets. That's when you're going to do most of your sales, or that's for philanthropy. If you're fundraising, that's obviously a big season. Summer's a big season for a lot of shit. So like, you're not going to pitch a new point of sale to, any restaurant in any coastal town in the summer when they're absolutely buzzing, right? Or the same in a ski resort in the winter. So I think that's interesting. And I didn't take any of that into account. I'm just like, hey, it's a 20-minute ask. But I think if we're going to do event-based stuff, that would obviously be huge. And you either want to leverage the busyness or avoid it. Cool. So what we learned is that this is, and man, I was kind of thinking about this in the shower this morning, and I was like, this is, and I know that you and Seb have been talking about this a lot, but I think this says a lot about the buyer journey nowadays. Period. So
when it comes to acquisition, this is like one of the new channels that a lot of people are leaning into.
Or user acquisition,
user acquisition, yes.
Yeah, just because everyone's a lot of these people are thinking SaaS acquisitions too. So we learned that it was a heavily kind of community influenced purchase. So it was like, hey, I belong to X, Y, and Z Discord. I belong to this Slack group. I belong to this Facebook group. I'm a participant on this Reddit wall. I have a mastermind group. Yada, yada. And so that's interesting. And so I wanted to ask you, what was the last software you bought and how'd you buy
it? So the product feedback I was given yesterday, it was for an automated trading platform. The last two were Level Fields AI. That's the one I had the call with. And then it was Trade Ideas. How I found out about it, in my trading group. There's a Discord channel I subscribe to.
No shit.
I've referred my friends to it. It's called Tech Conversations, and it's all about various trading strategies around options, Forex, crypto, you name it. But it's for those risky trades and finding out how to mitigate the risk and winning beyond traditional 20-30% returns. And let me say, it's gone phenomenal.
Okay, because it's very okay, got it. So you went community first and then backed out.
Naturally, because the challenge is today, you can do product research on Google. You're going to find a product that does everything you want, a list of products that do everything you want, but it's still hard to decipher which one actually gets me the closest. Because naturally, every software solution will get you 80% of the way there. You just have to figure out the other 20%. So I'll start on Google naturally with the creation of ChatGPT and other similar programs. That now helps to decipher, okay, you might want to focus on these top 3 for these specific reasons that you're researching. And then the community is the last stop. So it may be a general Google research, maybe a Chat GPT research conversation, but then the community is where we validate our assumptions. Who else has used this product? I will check Discord, I will check Reddit. And then once someone validates, or even Quora, someone will raise their hand. As you've noticed, Y Combinator, they have their own community chat as well. And everyone engages the same way. And then when one person validates, chances are they might be getting a referral code or something. But it's still better in this sense because here is a community of like-minded people who are saying, forget your research, this is the tool you should use. You can choose to stay in that community to ask questions as you learn more. And then once you feel good enough, from time to time, depending on the advanced user that you are, or the level of user that you are, I'm more technical and advanced with the custom API stuff. I may step away from that community until I need to ask a question again.
And come back in.
Exactly, because not everyone engages every day. Some people are just flies on the wall, absorbing information and then sharing when they have something of value. That's me. I don't want to be talking every day, but I'll ask a question and then share my lesson in how I got to that question. Here's my research, here are my thoughts. Who else had this issue? And now we have a chance to all talk about that one topic, right? That is a moment of value.
And that's so true because obviously, and there's so much happening with LLM right now, but it's like all the Discord and I guess the last thing that we bought was Refersion. We haven't bought it yet. We're on a free trial, and that was the same. So went straight to ChatGPT, and I'm asking for advice around components of an affiliate program, general launch strategies, and then informing a scorecard. And so I kind of did a base, as you mentioned, right? And then first thing is like, hey, what are even like the elements or the components that you should evaluate an affiliate program or an ambassador program software against? Cool. And then you kind of get to like a short list. And then for me, I belong to some different Slack groups that are for go-to-market people, PLG, SaaS people, whatever, and you can kind of drop it in there and get some quick feedback. Reforge is another one that's really solid. But I guess in my current setup for anything that's in this domain, I'm like, I get it to a certain point and then I flip it to you. And I'm like, hey, what have you seen in the market? What are you seeing your other consulting clients do? What's happening in kind of the RevOps, tech ops. So you have kind of like a trusted confidant. And so it's interesting because this is how they're buying software too.
Yeah, this is what the world is doing. There's too much information out there now to make a decision. So we're referring to our communities of like-minded individuals. Full stop.
Full stop. And I think that's very cool. And I think that opens up some very interesting levers for us. So I think obviously, so the learning was, holy shit. Or so back to just to pull it all together, because we've made some progress here, right? So it's like, all right, cool. We are trying to figure out our ideal customer, and we're trying to figure out how trial users are finding us. We sent some surveys. We did some quantitative research on the ICP. We looked at our surface area. We sent surveys, and it turns out that and it's like, hey, our ICP is X, and maybe we'll do a feature on that because that was a pretty cool exercise. But what we know for sure is that they're finding us via like a community-oriented point of influence. And then it's like, okay, how do we create a positive vibe for our SaaS, or how do we incentivize folks who are influential in those circles to help drive traffic and influence our way? And so we are standing up an ambassador program or an affiliate program, however you want to think about it. Traditionally, ambassador is more so like users of the product, et cetera, and affiliates are more so people who exist in the same ecosystem. But needless to, or I guess it goes without saying that both are kind of intended to generate a halo effect around your product, et cetera. And so when you think about the components of an affiliate or ambassador program, let's just use them synonymously here, commission rates or some type of incentive structure, which back to, and I simply put, it's like, hey, I mean, the two most common flavors are, do you want a chunk of revenue? Do you want to give your people a savings? And then it gets more interesting. Do you want access to beta features? Do you want a seat on the steering committee for the product roadmap? Like there's some very intrinsic, extrinsic kind of shit and some flavors there.
Yep.
You got to track it. Not easy to track an affiliate program. Just the same way as it's not easy to say, well, the person, clicked on this one ad and then they bought the thing right then. So it was the ad that sent them. This is not really how we buy anymore, right? So yeah, what are the challenges with like tracking affiliates?
I mean, overall, you're essentially describing another data point in a stack of data points that we have to thread and try to all feed into a system of record and then visualize in a robust profile. It is hard. So some of the issues with tracking affiliates is, let's say, for example, you give them a unique link. They improperly place that link somewhere. Someone clicks the link, gets to the page, leaves, and then comes back. That affiliate no longer gets that credit anymore because the person left the session.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or let's say, for example, another scenario that recently came up, someone's signing up and the company is manually asking them to fill out who referred you. They're not going to fill that out because it's an optional field. So with affiliates, the number one problem is always getting credit for the people they actually referred.
Exactly. Or, and if it's not structured, it's like, oh, I spelled Lewis with 2 S's. It's just a disaster, right? And it's like, oh boy.
Yeah.
Cool. And then obviously that's what created the emergence of tooling around this. So some of the stuff we looked at Refersion, Referral Factory, Brand Champ, and a lot of this is very skewed towards e-com because that's where a lot of like influencer marketing, they're, like wellness influencers, they're pumping, hey, I drink this bulletproof coffee shit every morning, backslash Kjael, right? And that's like a straight enough way to do it. But
yeah, and
anywho,
it's happening in channels that are hard to track. That's why these programs are so important, because they can see what's happening at a community level, at a social level, while all the other tools are mainly just looking at who's coming to our website. Exactly.
So so I think where we're at now is we're kind of refreshing the affiliate program, and this one was kind of like a soft launch with loyal customers. I think one thing that really put a lot of wind in my sails, because the other thing I was thinking about is like when you're in a sales-led growth thing, when you're like a CRO, you're really only, well, I mean, I shouldn't say that. I think like no matter what, like you never get a pat on the back for doing what you're supposed to do. Right?
No.
Right? If things go well, no one says shit. If things go really, or, if things go well over a prolonged period of time, then it's all of a sudden like, hey, you've really done well by us and we appreciate that, and that's why like any kind of, Yelp anything is very polarizing. It's either people that are like, holy shit, this was the greatest meal I've ever had in my life, or I'm never coming back to this dump ever again. No one eat here. Like that whole middle of the spectrum just is silent, right? So
to tell a lot of small. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Jump in.
I was going to say, to tell a small story from my IT help desk days, have come a long way. So shout out to Rochester Institute of Technology, Rochester City School District. We used to have a saying, when there's no tickets and everything's quiet, IT has done their job. When everything's working and you come on, you connect to the Wi-Fi and it just works, IT has done their job. You will never get thanked for that, but you will hear the loudest screams when something is not working. So I totally agree.
Right. And so, and that's just like an exposure bias, right? Where it's like, hey, you're just getting hit by this thing. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, this must be how the thing is. And it's like, well, that's not accurate. You're just getting overexposed to one side of the spectrum. And that's a mental fallacy. That's a thing that we all trip up with all the time, right? So needless to say, I have all this exposure to like support tickets, to things, and these are all reasonable, but over time you kind of slowly become jaded where it's like, fuck, man, it's like, is everything not going great? Yeah. And so I will say the one thing that got me super jazzed was, and I like wove in the ambassador ask, like, kind of 3 paragraphs into a biweekly update on, product enhancements, support enhancements, et cetera. And a bunch of hand raisers that just had so much love. They were like, yeah, I'm down. I want to be an
I love
ambassador.
that.
I love this shit. I'm anything I can do to help grow the business, you know? So I was, after I got that, I was like, all right, like, woo, you
Yes, that's
know,
what you
small
want to
wins.
see. That means
Yeah.
we have very engaged users. Whether the MRR and the acquisition numbers might look a certain way, when you actually touch base with them and they start raising their hands like that, that is the moment you're getting thanked for running a good product, managing a
Yeah.
good product.
And you know what's interesting? I like that almost could qualify as like a scorecard item, like a deep diligence scorecard item. Because it's like, hey,
Yes.
you know, daily active users, weekly active users, whatever. It's like how many affiliates or ambassadors do you have and what kind of business are they driving for you? And that's back to like what are your channels, right? Like which channels do you have right now? And
And it
unfortunately,
goes back to the Tim Ferriss question: what book have you given? What
yeah,
software have you given?
the
Affiliates are
most.
saying, here's how many people we have that are loving our platform.
Yeah. Well, and then because the main thing is like, you know, of the affiliate referrals, how many have converted to paid users? Because that's the other thing where it's like, hey, we're not
That
just
too.
looking for, and that there's a way more baked into that because that could be a product shortcoming, et
Right.
cetera. Cool. So
But
I just
challenge
sent the,
one.
yeah, challenge one. So I just sent the survey out and kind of calibrating around, you know, the soft launch with like the loyal, most of them were OG participants in the legacy affiliate kind of referral program strategy.
Hmm.
And then we're going to kick that off. Um, cool. So that's where we're at, man. I mean, I think from there, and if we kind of spin back to the key results, I mean, increasing daily website traffic, that's just a function of executing our content playbook and then identifying 3x optimization. So these are kind of the things that are remaining as we step into the back half of the sprint. I've got some really exciting stuff on the 3x optimizations, and I'm super ambitious about the ambassador and the affiliate program. And it's our job to find successful channels, make sure that they get off on the right foot, right? And one thing at a time, focus creates a space for performance, and then we start to stack new channels on. So I'm very optimistic about the community-based thing, but or I guess leveraging that via an ambassador and an affiliate program. I think there's other creative ways to do that as well. And away we go. Anything to add, my dude?
No, this has been a great session. I hope everyone listening has learned a lot. Any thoughts, questions, just drop it all into the comments. We would love to hear, what do you guys think about this session? What else could we be talking about? What did you learn? What did you like? What did you get excited by? We need the feedback.
Yes, no doubt, no doubt. Well said. I guess the last thing I was going to mention is I did a Next Rise has this huge technology and venture kind of ecosystem event in Seoul. I'm hoping to go live. We all need to go live.
We got
Supposedly
to go
Seoul
live.
is absolutely bananas. So it's supposed to be the
Let's
future
record a
straight up.
session out there.
Yeah. So this one is just for anybody who wants to peep it. This is way more meta, kind of my trajectory, why or what Micro SaaS is, period, why I got jazzed about it. We do a quick case study as an example acquisition and then some ways you involve. So the video's there. But all right, until 2 Thursdays from now, for the love of the game, God bless SaaS. May the SaaS gods look fondly upon you. And that's a wrap for today. Kjael, go get him today, buddy.
All right, you take care, Kjael.
Peace. Peace.
Crush it.